Good evening and welcome to News Review. Gibraltar was rocked this week as the bodies of 4 people were discovered in a house on Breshetti Steps. At a press conference, the RGP confirmed these were of a British male, a Spanish woman and 2 young children. An investigation into the deaths has begun. In what must have been surreal scenes today in town, the Royal Gibraltar Police were called to a residence in the area of Breshetti Steps at approximately 11:35 a.m. Inside, officers discovered the bodies of 4 individuals, a 31-year-old British male, a 37-year-old Spanish woman, a 4-year-old girl and a 6-week-old girl, all believed to be of the same family. Commissioner of Police Eddie Yomi held a press conference today at Newmore House, along with Detective Inspector Roy Bettis, Deputy Senior Investigating Officer, and Senior Investigating Officer Acting Superintendent Wayne Tunbridge. The RGP said inquiries were being carried out to contact close relatives of the family, and as such would not divulge the identities of the deceased. A full investigation is now being carried out with the Serious Crime Unit to establish the cause of death, but the RGP would not go into what happened to the 4 individuals or the time of death. 2 UK pathologists will be arriving in Gibraltar tomorrow, assisting with the investigation, and a post-mortem will follow. The incident has garnered much international press, with British and Spanish news outlets commenting on stabbing deaths. However, GBC approached the RGP for clarification, who could neither confirm nor deny the reports. Commissioner Yomi said they were reaching out to anyone with any information and have also already conducted inquiries, but at this time they were not looking for anyone else involved in the incident. An area of Governors Street has been cordoned off. According to eyewitness reports, at around 11 a.m. a locally resident man was heard knocking loudly on his front door as he called out to a visiting friend who had reportedly been staying with him. When there was no response, the police was alerted and numerous RGP vehicles were soon parked at Cornwalls, with a large team of officers investigating. The RGP's canine squad was also involved, as well as a doctor.
He was shouting and calling for somebody to open the door. He was getting a bit upset because he was banging for quite a while. And then I just forgot about it. I knew that it was my neighbour's voice. I could recognise it. Then I went out, and when I came back at 12 o'clock, I noticed that he was outside with the police and that everything was starting to be cordoned off. And of course I heard the news, the terrible news of what had happened. It's a baby and a child. It's unthinkable what they must have gone through at the last moments, you know. It's terrible.
The RGP also confirmed that officers involved in this morning's operation have received counselling, as have potential family members through family liaison officers. Commissioner Yomi himself also visited the scene, adding he was satisfied the RGP had the resources to be able to conduct this investigation. He also asked that people, primarily on social media, refrain from speculating on the incident. The investigation continues. And on Tuesday, the 4 bodies were moved to St Bernard's Hospital. At a press conference, the Commissioner of Police confirmed that there were wounds on the bodies, but would not comment on UK and Spanish press reports that the 4 had been stabbed.
The news that a family of 4 were found dead in harrowing circumstances has shaken the whole community, as well as making the international news. This afternoon, the bodies of the 2 adults were moved to St Bernard's Hospital. The 2 young children had been removed early this morning. Flowers, toys, candles and messages have been laid outside the building where they lost their lives. At a press conference today, Senior Investigating Officer Acting Superintendent Wayne Tunbridge confirmed there were wounds on all 4 bodies, but would not confirm what kind of weapon caused these. The RGP says it will not comment on any specific details circulated in the international press and locally by word of mouth.
Well, I'm not going to go into the detail of the investigation. I think we've been quite clear that we don't welcome any speculation. It's unhelpful and there is a lot of misinformation. What I'm asking the media is to wait for our updates and you will receive accurate information.
Are you concerned, given the number of details that have been sort of flying around, is the RGP concerned or will be investigating into the possibility of any leaks?
Well, it's not a question of leaks. It's a question of being sensitive to the situation and being sensitive to the family members who have yet to arrive in Gibraltar and formally identify the people we're dealing with. So it's sensitive to them and sensitive to the investigation of not sort of saying sort of things out of place.
The Commissioner said that a pathologist from the UK's Home Office who has worked with the RGP in the past will be arriving in Gibraltar tomorrow, with the force expecting to engage the services of a paediatric pathologist by Thursday. The identities of the British man, Spanish woman and 2 young girls have not yet been released, with the RGP saying that some of the relatives have either not yet been notified or are on their way to Gibraltar. GBC understands the Spanish woman had other children, some of whom are yet to learn of their mother's fate. The Commissioner expressed the RGP's thanks for the support of other law enforcement agencies, adding it's been an emotional experience for everyone involved at the scene.
Well, certainly in my experience, a very gruesome scene, one of the worst that I've ever seen myself, and I sort of personally went in yesterday lunchtime. Why I sort of asked the officers that needed to go in, or I said that only officers that needed to go in should go in.
The Royal Gibraltar Police has reiterated its call for anyone with information that might be useful to come forward and contact the police on 200 725 00.
In addition to the many tributes laid at Bushetti Steps by members of the community since Monday's tragic news, a wreath was laid by the Commissioner of Police Eddie Yomi outside the building where the family of 4 was found dead. The Chief Minister, Fabian Picardo, also laid a wreath at Bushetti Steps, expressing his deepest sympathy on behalf of the people of Gibraltar. Meanwhile, a Home Office pathologist and his team have been inspecting the crime scene at Bushetti Steps. They arrived Wednesday morning. Also, a paediatric pathologist arrived later in the week to assist with the post-mortem on the bodies of the family of 4 who were found dead. In other news this week, a Spanish national was extradited to Spain after having been arrested on a European arrest warrant. 31-year-old Borja Porvillo Martín was wanted for absconding the jurisdiction while serving time for a robbery he committed in the Campo area in 2005. He surrendered to the extradition at the magistrate's court. Porvillo Martín was sentenced in Spain to 9 years in prison for robbery and possession of a firearm during an incident in 2005. 3 years later, in November 2008, he was given a weekend release and never returned. Porvillo Martín was handed over to the Spanish National Police midday Tuesday by officers of the RGP. It will now be up to the Spanish courts to decide his fate. The Chief Minister this week accused the opposition leader of wriggling himself further onto the hook and not answering any of the accusations of misleading Parliament. In a motion presented on Wednesday, Mr. Picardo said Mr. Feetham had misled the House by suggesting he didn't know about his law firm Hassan's representing the Sunbourne Hotel. In reply, Mr. Feetham said this motion was abusive and all about burying the Dr. Giraldi debate in a sea of news.
Fabian Picardo said his adversary couldn't have failed to know that Hassan's was acting for the Sunbourne Hotel, and produced a number of government press releases making reference to the law firm's interest in the hotel. Mr. Picardo said this issue has come up in Parliament before, but he didn't want to drag the House through the time required to deal with a motion like this one. However, he said he now had no choice given Mr. Feetham has once again failed to declare his interest as a partner of Hassan's. He said the opposition leader had misled the House when he said he didn't know Hassan's was acting for the Sunbourne Hotel in the matters raised in Parliament questions. Mr. Feetham's response delved into the entire Sunbourne episode, accusing the Chief Minister of being the one to mislead the House and the people of Gibraltar by not having revealed in Parliament that the government-owned company was financing the Sunbourne. Mr. Feetham said it was sad that Mr. Picardo cannot break away from the politics of the personal and the personalised, and the motions against him were nothing more than a blatant attempt to drown the Dr. Giraldi debate in a sea of news. He said there were 300 employees in Hassan's, and no single lawyer could be aware of the work of everyone else in the firm. He said it was clear that his reference in question time was in respect of the Sunborn's certificate of fitness alone, which the Chief Minister could not have misunderstood. He added that if he had to choose between his Hassan's partnership or his duty to Gibraltar, because of pressure from the government, he would choose Gibraltar every day of the week. The Chief Minister then rose to criticise the fact that opposition members had been talking for over an hour in this debate, so he couldn't be accused of being the one to delay the Giraldi motion. Mr. Picardo recalled that he himself had been the recipient of motions in relation to his partnership of Hassan's when he was the leader of the opposition, and wondered why Mr. Feetham thought this was any different. The Chief Minister said the motion was short and clear, and Mr. Feetham had made no arguments which countered any of its main points. He said the opposition had twisted and turned for over an hour and only managed to wriggle themselves more firmly onto the hook.
A second motion by Fabian Picardo accusing Daniel Feetham of misleading was also predictably passed by government majority. In this case, the accusation was that Mr. Feetham misled readers of the Federation of Small Businesses magazine In Touch. This because the opposition leader had quoted the Chief Minister comparing Spain to North Korea at the United Nations and associating himself with a comment by SDGG spokesman Dennis Matthews at the UN that Spain was a terrorist state.
The motion criticises remarks by Mr. Feetham that the government created an artificial reef on environmental grounds when, barely a few metres on, it now plans a land reclamation, and that the government is misleading the public on both public finances and the strength of the economy. Fabian Picardo conceded that he had compared Spain to North Korea, but said this wasn't at the UN, but in media interviews. He denied that he had associated himself with Dennis Matthews' UN comment and claimed he didn't know he was going to make it. Mr. Picardo described these as very damaging allegations. Regarding the reef, he said the planned reclamation nearby was inherited from the GSD. Daniel Feetham acknowledged he'd been mistaken regarding where the Chief Minister made his North Korea remark. He recalled it had been on BBC Radio and Sky News, but then claimed this was even worse, as it resulted in the comment receiving wider exposure than if it had been uttered at the UN. Mr. Feetham rejected Mr. Picardo's explanation of the Matthews statement at the UN. He noted that Dennis Matthews went as part of a single Gibraltar delegation and suggested it wasn't credible that the Chief Minister would not have known what he planned to say. As to the reclamation, the opposition leader said Mr. Picardo can scrap a GSD project if he wants to, as he has done before. After a contribution by the father of the House, Joe Bossano, Fabian Picardo brought the debate to a close. In countering Daniel Feetham's arguments, he commented, among other things, that comparing Spain to North Korea in his broadcast interviews, which also included Channel 4, was a deliberate move, because it got the world's attention and exposed the Partido Popular and José Manuel García Margallo's policy towards the ROC. The debate ended at 8:45, with all 9 government ministers present voting in favour of the motion, and the 6 members of the GSD who were in the chamber voting against.